Welcome to another edition of the Growth Seekers Leadership Mastermind. It's where we talk all things leadership, and our definition of leadership is that interaction where influence happens. Quite often, we have to begin with influencing ourselves to take the actions that we need to take in order to have the lives that we want. And once we get really effective at that, is to also be able to influence others to take actions that they need to take or get them to want to take that in order to have the lives that they want, right? So today we're going to be talking about simplicity and leadership, and it's really interesting. I really appreciate Wolfgang for bringing up that topic today. And as soon as he brought it up, it resonated with everybody here in the group. And so simplicity, when we think about influencing ourselves first, um, just go back and think about things that you when trying to change in your life or things you wanted to achieve and how when they get complicated, the level of engagement drops, right? The confidence drops. Well, I can't do this, and also from a energetic perspective, right? We find ourselves being uh, a bit overwhelmed by that contracting energy because things are too complicated. And the simpler things are in our lives, the more likely we are to complete them, to be engaged in it, to have confidence in it. And it's the same when we're endeavoring to influence other people. The simpler we keep it, the more likelihood is that people are going to be engaged. They're going to be feel confident about the possibilities of being able to complete whatever you've asked them to do or to follow. And I know even Andrew could probably vouch for this. Back in the old sales days, the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? Back in sales, I remember that. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Like that, even to the point that back in the day, I remember they always told us if you don't keep it simple, you may actually talk yourself out of a sale, right? So the simplicity has always been there. And even think about anything that we've been able to achieve in our lives or change or what have you, the simpler it's been, the more successful we've been at it. The things that we completed, the things that we've been able, and also the whole idea of even the other principle about how do you eat an elephant, right? That old saying of how do you eat an elephant, right? One piece at a time, right? It's really simple. But if you look at the whole elephant and trying to figure out how am I going to eat that whole elephant, right? But then you think about it, I just got to eat this next piece. In my performance coaching with athletes and specifically hockey players, I just get them to focus on one shift at a time, right? All you got to do is just that 35, 40 seconds. That's all you got to really take care of. In sales, there's a technique called reduce it to ridiculous. If something costs 1,000 or $100, right? Break it down to, hey, that's basically less than $10 a month, right? So the simplicity, there's something powerful about keeping things simple. And today we're going to be talking about that. And I just wanted to set the table there and just wanted to pass it to my co-facilitator of this group, Mark, and wanted to see if there's anything else you wanted to add to the table or if there's something you'd like to pick up and elaborate on before we just open it up to the whole mastermind.
I think today I just want to open it up to the mastermind. I'm notorious for making things unnecessarily complicated, and I know the KISS principle is 100% right. I know that when it's complicated, it's wrong. You haven't really boiled it down to its core essence, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion and hearing everybody's insights on it.
Yeah, and what's really cool is that we have someone like Andrew, who's got the experience of being in leadership for many years, and somebody like Wolfgang, who has the experience with breath work and the simplicity of meditation and mindfulness and what have you. And then we have Ran, who's a phenomenal saleswoman. I got to say that. At work, she's the top salesperson, and so I've watched her as well. She keeps it really simple, right? She just it gets to the point where, okay, can I get you one or two? Do you want one or two of those? Right? Do you want 10 of those? Right? Like she just keeps it really simple, right? Like, and if people ask her a question, yeah, she answers the question, but she comes back, okay, great. Can I ring that up for you? Like, because it's just so simple. You're in the store, you have your credit card, like you're in a mall, you're there to buy some. Oh, is this what you want to buy? Okay, great. Let me just ring that up. So when I watch her, it just kind of reminds me of my old sales days and how important it is to really just keep it simple. So, who'd like to share their thoughts first? I know everybody's got thoughts here. Okay, then we'll start off with Andrew, as I know I could hear the wheels turning with Wolf. Will come up with some.
Well, Wolfgang, I have a list of 5 things here, and every single one of them, that every point that I was going to make about keeping things simple always goes back to breathing, which is interesting because that's your specialty, Wolfgang, breathing, right? When Walter was talking about working with his new client, the new hockey kid, he said, we're going to start with a deep breath. Hang on. When I was working this morning with a client that runs a large dealership in Florida, he was so like spastic, like crazy out of his mind almost. Like I said, just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. I'm going to give you 3 steps, get a piece of paper, calm down. We're going to take Covey. When Covey said, begin with the end in mind, he immediately said, I want everybody to take a deep breath, close your eyes. What do you see? So breathe. What do you see? My golf coach, when he coached me, he would say before the shot, take a deep breath. My father, when I was pitching baseball, 1 pitch at a time, Andrew, 1 pitch at a time. Take a deep breath, let it flow. I think simplicity, when you look at simplicity, it comes down to just being centered with yourself. The theory of 5, when we work with a client, mastering you, everything starts with you in a relationship, business, leadership. It all starts with you and the way you handle your emotions. And how do you handle your emotions? Breathe better. Don't react. Don't take a breath. Think about it first, right? Stop, challenge, and choose. So everything that I look at on this piece of paper really comes back to breathing. So my question for Wolfgang, because he's the master at breathing, when as leaders, when we get so crazy in our mind and we make it so complicated, how would you advise people to bring it back to the breath? Because we're not thinking about that. I used to put a rubber band on my wrist to snap it so that would stop me from saying something stupid. And I said a lot of things in my life stupid. So I used to carry that rubber band and say, no, and that hurt, by the way, because so how do you get centered? How do you bring it back to breathing? That simple, right?
It's very simple. You need already to be there. When you're alone and you come in a place where you are freaking out, it needs to pass because nobody's there telling you. I mean, I'm doing that with my clients. I'm there when somebody's like unrelaxed. I say, take a deep breath. If you're not there, you won't remember. That's why I'm making a weekly breathing, and I really revolutionized breath work. I got so simple. I released all the techniques I ever learned. I love them. I can see the benefits. It's all too complicated. I came back to something so fundamentally coming back in your body. It's anchored in yourself. And we prepare that these reflexes, it's all in our reflexes, our body knows, and we ignore our reflexes. We got trained. We got deeply trained for decades not to have our reflexes expressing, which are basically there to bring us into this breath and centeredness. So we are trained not to be centered. So when you're already there, Andrew, and you have not one person telling you, take a breath, you're lost. So you need to be already there so it actually doesn't happen. When it happens, it's too late. You have to make it pass. You have to let it pass. But then already it happened. Whatever happened, happened already. So even women, when they give birth, there is a midwife telling, breathe, because she is so in pain. It's the most simple thing to do, but you're so in pain that you don't remember. So everyone needs to have a midwife, and I'm the midwife of breathing. And I know people in the breathing circle, after a while, it happens to them that they are breath. So they don't do it. It happens to them that in a moment of excitement, let's say, they realize that they allow these reflexes to happen. And this is a skill. So what I advise is train breathing, then you have it available when you need it. It's like driving the car. When you say while driving the car, you need to learn the situation, it's too late. You learn it up front, you practice. You won't get in a Formula One car. You don't get even off the start. You don't drive 1 meter when you don't know how to drive it. So you have to train before, and that's the same for the breath. And that's the reason why I make the breathwork coaching. And I revolutionized breathing into absolute simplicity, which is actually ridiculous, but people don't know. It's so simple. It's so simple that people don't believe.
That's a good point. Are you complete?
Yes, I'm muted. I'm complete. Thank you for listening.
No worries. It's really interesting. You said something at the end there. It's so simple, but people don't believe it. And it's interesting. I've been really flooded with a lot of my young hockey players now coming back, and we go back to that idea of the quantum physics and how 99.999% of everything at the subatomic level is just waves or space, and 0.0001 are particles. And when they found that when the scientists go down and look through the microscopes, if they're looking to see waves, they see waves. If they go looking for particles, they see particles, the observer effect. Or as Joe Dispenza would call it, the placebo. And he talks about you are the placebo. Right? And how what you said there at the end, right? Is that it's so simple, but people don't believe it. And what happens is that the reason why things get complicated has to do with our belief, right? If we like if we can't believe that, it just really does come down to the breath. It's got to be more than that. It's like I know Wolfgang's saying this, and there's a part of me that kind of agrees with him. But man, my life is just so complicated. He just doesn't understand me, and we get into that me like, oh, if he only knew how busy my life is and what I'm responsible for, or how my wife was, or all my employees always. But it all comes down, I think, that it also comes down to your belief in simplicity. And that comes also from no worries, Wolfgang. Yeah, so it also comes down to our experiences in the past, because one of the things that is an energy block are limiting beliefs. And a belief is a statement that we believe to be true based on past experience. And a limiting belief is a limiting belief because at some point that belief was helpful to us, right? Believing that somehow we could juggle 5 things at a time, and perhaps we had some success with it, right? So, we did something. We wrote a really complicated thesis or something where things being complicated seemed to work for us, but there comes a point where it's not working anymore. Then what? Right? Because you're stuck with a belief that things have to be complicated, they have to be a certain way. And when they're not that way, that very belief is what prevents you from just even believing that it comes down to the breath. Marc.
Yeah. I thank you guys for sharing what you shared so far. I have gone down that quantum rabbit hole quite extensively for many decades. And I mean, I think I started when I was like 16, getting fascinated by time and space and all the rest of it. So there's, you know, incredible sophistication and complication in that whole arena, you know. But after getting to the bottom of that hole and living there for a while and sort of coming to a realization of how it all comes together, it really is simple. You know, it's find what you love, play hard, doing what you love, like and it is play, not work, right? Because you're playing the game of life, so you just play all out with all your emotions and your thoughts and your passion. You just give it your all in whatever it is that you love and have fun with, and the universe conspires to give it to you. It's just that simple. It you know, and we the thing I love about the KISS principle is after all of that 25 plus years of research, it all comes down to just have a good time, right? It all just comes down to, you know, live and play and love and dance and, you know, build incredible memories with the people that you value and cherish, and do the things that you like, that you want to do. And if you're not, then just change it. It's really that simple. So I'm complete.
Andrew.
I'm so glad you brought up the quantum physics, because I'm into quantum computing right now, and not because I wanted to. Somebody challenged me to look into it, and I did. But I go back to the simplicity of what you just said, Marc. Is anybody familiar with the Blue Zone? Okay, so good. You know, if you look at the Blue Zone and you look at the people that live to be 100 years old, and they studied a lot of these people all over the world, and it came back to the number one factor with longevity, based on their opinion, was meaning and purpose. When you find your meaning and purpose and you serve others with that meaning and purpose, you are the benefactor of longevity, because you have found your meaning and purpose, and you're giving your gift to others and making the world a better place because of that. You know, and if you stop and you think of all these people putting all this, and nutrition and exercise are important, and I get it, but none of those people were at the gym. None of those people were on treadmills. They were in their garden. They were making wine. They were crafting pottery. They were loving their family. They were the bakers of the village. So it's so simplistic. Find what you love to do and give it away, right? Help others, right? Very, very simplistic. I watch all these people on the internet right now going crazy with the election in the United States. 5 years from now, they won't even know who the candidates are. They won't even remember who was running. And they get so upset with that. But going back to what Wolfgang said real quick, I guess for me, Wolfgang, it's transcendental meditation is so simple that when I learned transcendental meditation, I couldn't believe how simplistic it was. And when I learned my mantra, and within 5 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, I can get into transcendental meditation very quickly. But I have a system and I have a mantra. And with that mantra and with that system, I can meditate for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even 3 minutes, and any part of the day. I guess what I was saying to you is when someone gets into that state of anger or confusion and they don't have somebody around them to help them to breathe, to break, how does someone break that pattern themselves? How do you what are some of the things that you have coached or taught people to stop that pattern and get themselves centered? Because when you're in that zone of like an athlete, Walter, right? And I'd like your feedback too. Because my father would yell from the sidelines, breathe, Andrew, breathe. And that would break the pattern. Now, as I learned later on in life, pitching so many games, I could do that with myself. I could say, okay, you're high, you're wide, you're deep, breathe, Andrew, breathe. So I learned how to do that with athletics. Golf shot, hit a bad golf shot, breathe. Get back into the basics. But how do you teach that to others? That's how do you teach that simplistic technique or breathing, stop, challenge, and choose, or whatever it is?
Practicing with them. And that's what I do. So if you want to breathe with people for weeks, months, you can do that. Or you say, there is Wolfgang who does that, and I do it every week. You have to be there. You need to have the father who is yelling at you in a moment to practice. I'm that dad.
Yep.
That's my job. I just remind people. It's so simple. I need not to forget. Then I'm lost. So I
So
just
that's my
remind.
point to you then, Wolfgang. How do you bring yourself back in? Because I know how I do it with other things, but how do you bring yourself back in to center?
I'm doing that since 22 years.
But
Practice.
there's something that you've taught yourself either subconsciously or consciously to get yourself centered, right? There's something that happens, and that's I guess the point, that simplistic little thing that you've trained yourself to bring yourself back to centered breath.
Well, routines. We had a meeting with Steve Hardison this week, and there is something what is called the document, which is like taking the how is it called? There is a routine in our head, no matter what, it's there. So we need to change this routine, and there is something what is called the document. Steve Hardison is practicing this document every day 20, 30 times. So we need to have, I have a practice, which I have a routine where I have the habit to practice it. There is no way around. If you stop practicing, a new habit comes and it takes you back. And you're never finished. A master is not who stops practicing. A master is knowing why I love to practice.
And to add to that too, Wolfgang, like one of the things I've discovered is that mastery isn't. And Mark, sorry, I know you had that. And I just wanted to add this in. That mastery isn't an outcome; it's actually a process. The one thing that it does is it gives you a different relationship with uncertainty. And I think the other thing that's really important is like um, there's a method that I use with my players, and I teach them. You know how when we were taught if we're on fire, drop what's that? Stop, drop, and roll. Well, what I teach my clients is stop, breathe, and ask. Right? Stop, breathe, and ask. Right? Is this story true? Is it serving me? Um, do I want to show up being right or being connected? So stop, breathe, and ask. Because when you inquire of yourself, first of all, you're the captive audience in your own story. And if you can use those methods, stop, breathe, and ask, it is a pattern interrupt. You're interrupting the routines. I'm complete. Mark?
Yeah, I love this question, Andrew. I think that the simplest way to describe it from at least my experience is recognize that the core issue is nervous system dysregulation, right? So there's a lot of complexity there, but it's fundamentally a neurological issue that the other person is experiencing, likely a disconnection primarily of their vagal nerve, right? Which is that heart brain connection. And the simplest way that I've found to re-regulate someone is Greg Braden's work, where he teaches that heart regulation, where you're just feeling your heart, putting your hands on your heart, directing your consciousness there, and then breathing into it, in and out, and doing that. And that helps re-regulate, your heart back into that state. But finally, the other thing too is that there's a lot of people that are abusing alcohol and cigarettes and other toxins, especially high performers, because they self-medicate due to all that stress and pressure, and they're constantly in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn sort of state, where their oxytocin is just like through the roof, right? So there's like a detoxification and neurological support component to it as well, where they may need like I think magnesium, and there's a few other supplements that are really good for the nervous system specifically, right? So but the simplest thing is breathing into it in the moment. And then the last point is like a book like The Power of Now, which helps the person become aware that they're not their thoughts and they're not their mind, right? That they are the observer that's observing their thoughts and their mind, and getting and allowing for them to create some space, right, between themselves and the outside world, so that they can breathe into that space when they are triggered, right? Or when their nervous system is dysregulated. Then it allows for someone to start to get those brief glimpses of what being consciously aware is. I'm complete.
Rayanne and then Wolfgang.
No, I was just gonna say, from my perspective, usually when I get under a lot of stress, I call it reduce to the ridiculous. I kind of stop and I observe what's going on and I kind of understand where I'm at and try to be the observer of where I'm at. And then from there, I have another thing I call radical self-care. So if I was over a lot of stress, then I go, okay, I'm going into radical self-care. So I have kind of little stages that I would look at things and then take action from there.
Yeah, and I know what the radical self-care costs. It's usually a pedicure and a manicure. I know when she's going to radical self-care, it's at least $100, right? So, Wolfgang.
Andrew, to your question, how do you get back? It is so simple that it's ridiculous. We have them built in our body. Did you ever realize that you sometimes sigh or you sometimes yawn and you never wondered why you do that in a certain moment? And did you realize how are you after these reflexes? You are centered, you're present. And that's exactly what I do. I bring people back to recognize the body's reflexes, which we are trained to suppress. When you were yawning as a kid, with a voice, somebody said, sit still, shut up. And when you did that in the church, that was the worst thing. Because somebody feels judged. Come back and train your reflexes and they bring you back. You don't have to do anything. So it's so simple. Our body brings us back when we are listening into the body. Thank you very much for the topic. It just came up in the last call 1 hour before, where I actually came in and said, what can we change? It's all too complex. And we discovered simplicity. So thank you very much for listening and working on this topic.
Thank you for the topic, Wolfgang.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too, buddy. I just wanted to add that one of the beautiful things that Wolfgang does in his breathing meditations is he challenges you to not cover your mouth when you yawn. This was like one of the first things that was ingrained into me as a kid, right? You know, cover your mouth, like, you know, like this. But then he challenges you in those breathing circles to, you know, like to basically roar, right? And it gives you this, I don't know, it's a unique feeling to just let it all out, you know, and just so I think that's a beautifully simple example that he just brought, because it does make you feel recentered afterwards. One of many things he does in his meditations, but anyways.
Who was up, Andrew or Ryan? I didn't know who had their hands up first. Oh no, so it's Andrew. You're on mute, Andrew.
Rianne, were you
No,
up next, Rianne?
No, she just left it up.
Okay. So obviously, you know, Rianne, Marc, Wolfgang, Walter, myself, we've been trained in these different practices of meditation and breathing. And my real question was, maybe I didn't ask the question that well enough, because Covey used to say that if you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right answer. So you got to ask a better question, Andrew, right? So my real question was, how do we, as coaches, mentors, how do we teach the simplistic? For an example, James Clear has the habit loop. And the habit loop It's very simple. If you want to exercise tomorrow morning, take your exercise clothes the night before, put them where you're going to wake up, and you got to trip over them, then that's your habit loop. That creates the routine. So the habit loop, but what I'm talking about is the stressful situation where the person doesn't have a coach, doesn't have anybody around. How do you teach that person? Because to say it's just that simple, well, that's not true, because it's much more complicated than that. The person that overeats, Dr. Anderson says, stop, challenge, choose. Well, I ate the hoagie and I didn't stop and I didn't challenge myself and I didn't think about it. I just ate it because I didn't get conscious. I'm the direct person that speaks directly to people, so I didn't stop myself from speaking directly. How do you teach, train, motivate the person to stop, challenge, and choose, or to breathe? So that's really the question here. How do you transfer that skill to somebody? And obviously, Wolfgang says you practice with them, but now you're not there anymore. What are some of the things that you can, tips that you can give people to go from subconscious, because that's where we're at, we're in the subconscious, to the conscious, to the super conscious, because that's where you want to go. And that's where I'm at with that question.
I'll let Mark go. I've got thoughts on it, but I'd like to get.
I'm sure you do, buddy, because I was thinking of your work. The transition from level 1 and 2, the key distinguishing variable about level 3 is that person has to want to take responsibility for themselves, forgive, and cooperate, right? So you can bring conscious awareness to the issue, right? But the person themselves has to do it. So it is a practice, in like everything else, that they're going to experience the adversity, the obstacles in your absence. So you just equip them by expanding their conscious awareness on the issue, and then learning how to create that space, like pause for a second. Like a simple technique would be pause for, if you feel like you're getting emotionally engaged and in a negative way, pause for 30 seconds or a minute, and then respond versus react. So that's like a simple one. And then in that 1 minute, just breathe into it. Right. And then it just comes down to, like, I love the way Walter puts it, choose connection over being right in that moment. Right. Like you don't know that you're right. You believe you're right. But you might actually be wrong. So prioritizing connection, right, over being right in that one moment allows for you to, again, create some conscious awareness. And then I think the whole thing you're really trying to develop in that person is for them to create that space, that bubble in their mind and in their thought worlds, so they're not being triggered. Right. And then they can actually respond appropriately. And then, ultimately it just comes down to practicing it. Like it's just, you could teach them breathing techniques like Greg Braden, and in meditation, and learning how to separate their thought world from the external world. Like there's lots of different practices, but the fundamental thing that you got to confront them with is step 1. Do you want to actually fix this? Are you willing to take responsibility for it? Are you willing to cooperate? And are you willing to let go of the way you used to be, so that you can be somebody new in the future? And if there's no willingness, right, then you just have to accept they're not ready.
Well, let's say there is. They're willing, they're ready, they're able. That's the point. That I'm already there. So I have a client, Andrew, I don't know how to get control over my thoughts, my words, my actions. How do I improve this? Because
Walter, you go ahead. I got some more thoughts, but yeah, Walter, you go ahead.
I think it all comes down to the scale of their willingness to change. One on a scale of 1 to 10, if somebody's below a 5 or less on a willingness to change, yeah, it gets down to that whole idea that we can't want something for someone else more than they want it for themselves.
so I'm saying it's a 10 plus, Walter. They're all in. They want to change.
Yeah. So then if you got a 10 plus, then I know that the core like of the 10 disciplines that I teach, the one that I really start off with and keep coming back to is awareness. It's a noticing, because there's when we're in the zone, there's something that happens in the zone. We can create, observe, and experience anything we desire as quickly as we believe possible. So there's desire and belief. And so one of the things I find with awareness, it's tied into emotional intelligence, right? Being able to be aware of what you're feeling and understanding why you're feeling it. And then also understanding how you're showing up is making other people feel. And I know that I drive my wife crazy, because when I have something that kind of rubs me the wrong way, I make I'm like everybody else. I have my level 2 drops. She could vouch for that, right? But then when I process it, I realize that and I really make an effort to try not to um I try not to like throw her under the bus, right? I say, you know what? I just want you to know that because when I point something out, she'll all of a sudden get defensive and tell me why she did that. And I said, the issue isn't why you did it. I understand why you did it, but the way you're showing up for me and the way that you're showing up for me, this is how it's affected me, right? So I think that awareness is responsibility, because it's the one thing that'll take us out of that level 1 and 2 when we feel like we're at the effect of life, where we're worried, anxious, or we're angry with ourselves, other people. People can stay there a minute, an hour, a day, a week, years. Think about all the family trees that people don't get along, and they even forget what the issue was. But that whole thing is that you'll never forget how somebody made you feel. So awareness is responsibility, because the minute you start to get some awareness on the inside, you start realizing you have a choice. And that's where the desire and the belief comes in. Not only do you have to have the desire to want to change, you have to believe that you can change. Right? Goes back to the quantum physics. When they go looking for waves, they see waves, and go looking for particles, they see particles. So the two things, and I always talk about everybody I coach, right? That I can give you tools, I can give you insights, I can tell you cool stories, but I can't give you the desire, and I can't make you believe it. That's your responsibility, because any choices that you make are going to affect your life experience, and also it's going to affect other people's experience of you, and you're going to be making choices based on these things, and this is what's going to create your life. Like Carl Jung said, right? Unless we make our subconscious conscious, it will dictate our lives, and we will call it fate. Many people feel like the reason that we're not there, other people were lucky, they were fortunate, right? Oh, they had this going for them. But yeah, there's so many people that didn't have things going for them, and they've got the life that they want. So somewhere along the way, I think that, and that's why the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is getting someone to do something. Inspiration is getting them to want to do that something. And I think that a lot of the personal development for years has been about motivation. That's why they even talk about motivational speakers, right? And that's why people will go to these motivational speakers, and then it's good for a week or two, and then yeah, it's like then they need some more motivation. I know people that are addicted to going to seminars and podcasts, and again, all these things are really great, but where it all happens is inside of ourselves, right? Our desire and our belief about who we are and what is possible for our lives. Perhaps.
Okay, I got to jump in here. I got a simple acronym for you, Andrew. Okay, it's 2 simple acronyms: beta and bait. Okay, all the letters stand for the same thing.
How you spell beta?
BETA,
Okay.
and bait as in BATE. It starts with belief, okay, and it's a behavioral loop, and it depends on which direction of the loop you want to go. If you're more into stoicism and you're action oriented, you're going to want the BATE because it's belief, actions, thoughts, and emotions. And then that brings you back to belief again, right? If you're more of an emotional person, you go the other way, which is beliefs and the emotions associated to the belief, the thoughts, and then the actions, right? But the point is that you're teaching the other person a behavioral loop where they're constantly redefining their belief about who they are and the thoughts or I like if, say, for example, I'm a car salesman. I sell cars. That's who I believe I am in the world. Okay. So that's my belief. Okay. Do my actions reflect that belief? Do my thoughts reflect that belief? And do my emotions affect or represent that belief? Right. And then if not, okay, well, now I can change or improve my belief about who I am and how I'm going about what I'm doing by looking at my actions and optimizing my actions and optimizing my thoughts and then optimizing my emotions to get the results so that when I show up in front of that person, I'm the best friggin' car salesman in the world because I believe I'm the best car salesman, right? So the thing is that you're setting up a loop however the person wants to do it, through emotions or through actions, but either which way, they got to get all that working. And what I realized about Walter's work, just really briefly, is these young kids coming to him, they believe they're hockey players. They believe they're going to play in the NHL. And the action part of it, practicing, going to the rink every day, blah, blah, all that is already set in place. The only thing Walter does as a mental performance coach is help them optimize their thought world and their emotional world so that they're the best they can be on the ice without the mind game of getting this, getting scored on or, whatever, getting a shutout or, being the points leader of the league or whatever. Right. So the point is that it's just a behavioral loop about thoughts, emotions, feelings, and actions, or thoughts, action. Yeah. Beta or bait.
I love it. So it ties right into what I do because I start with your behavior type first. Because for anybody to say it's as simple as doing this doesn't know anything about human behavior because it's not that simple. Because each one of it's not. So each one of us has a completely different subconscious programming in our DNA. If you're an eagle, you're a dominant, you have a completely different thought process built into your DNA. If you're an inspirational, which is your parrot, you have a completely different DNA. If you're a dove and you're a steady, and this is proven psychology. This is not Andrew Schultz's opinion. This is proven psychology. So if you're that steady, you have to know which behavior type you are. If you can't coach somebody without knowing that, in my opinion. And when I'm able to get that person to identify what behavior type they are, now they know their behavior type, then I take them to emotional intelligence. But I can't go to emotional intelligence and I can't go to performance before they don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
Because then when they know who they are, that's where the breakthrough happens. Doesn't matter what I know. It doesn't matter how many books I read. If they don't know who they are and they don't know how to control their behavior and their emotions, that's where the real work comes. I wish we had another hour. I have to go.
Yeah, we gotta go. But one last thing I just wanted to add on that. That's why my process is my clients I work with, there's a requirement of doing the ELI assessment
Hmm.
because and I spend an hour and a half with them to help them understand that they are this energetic spiritual being having a human experience, a cause and effect, why
Yeah, it's good stuff.
action, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I use. But anyhow, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we're gonna get the vehicle out to get repaired. Woohoo! Bye for now.